honestly, I think word of mouth, that's the other reason I really love a small community, because if you do things right consistently, the word gets out much faster in a small community than it does in a city. You get lost in the city. And I think you have to work harder spending more money on advertising.
We are looking forward our way. Hi, this is Brett, and with me as always is Carol, but we're on the road visiting Lancaster, Ohio, just southeast of Columbus.
Yes, Brett, we are on the road again. We've been doing this a little bit and getting out and meeting folks all over the place. And you know, it is often said that mature adults are the most successful in starting and owning their own businesses. And that's what our topic today is going to be. Needless to say, the past couple of years have been beyond difficult. Today, we're going to explore a small business ownership with my friend, Ava Edmonds, who is the owner of Ava Jewelers in Lancaster. Ava, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Hi.
Well, could you give our listeners some information on you, your background, how you began to create such beautiful jewelry, and what led you to realizing that it was time to own your own business? And it was that was the goal.
This store is my second store. I began my first store in Colorado. My parents were jewelers in Aspen, Colorado, and then they moved their store to Winter Park. And then I helped them a lot in their second store. Then met my husband, David, who happens to be from Lancaster. We started a store in Breckenridge, Colorado, and sold it successfully to another couple. Deciding we didn't want to live the mountain life any longer. It's a little hard to travel and get necessities in those days. And that was when I was in my 20s.
Wow. But actually to start a store that young in life successfully had to be a huge, huge step.
Well, a lot. I was young. I was 27, and we had been there for several years while my son was growing up, but at a certain point, David had a back injury, and that really required us to really sell the business and to move on and find other things to do for a while until that sort of cured itself.
Okay.
So you've got a background in retail, if nothing else, specifically jewelry, so it's kind of helped with this then.
Oh, immensely.
Yeah.
Watching my mom and my dad make mistakes and do things right. You know, just being able to watch that was a really great place for me to learn.
Well, I can attest to her mother's incredible skills and vision in jewelry. I have one of her necklaces. And listeners, the reason that Ava is with us is because I'm in her shop a lot. So I like buying baubles. I'm trying to convince Brett that we're going to go buy baubles today before we go back home.
We came extremely close to recording this podcast in the store. So
Yes.
thinking, you really want to be amongst that jewelry for a long time. While I ask the question, your eyes are going to be looking around. Oh, yeah, maybe I get that one.
It is a little dangerous when the owners of the jewelry store know you by first name and have your cell phone number. So we are enjoying this conversation with Ava, but the end product will be a visit to the store. So we want to give an overview of your business. And first, for those listening who don't know Columbus and Lancaster. Lancaster is southeast of Columbus. It's a fairly large city. There are 40,000 people living in Lancaster, at least at the last, not the most recent census, but the census before. It's located less than an hour from Columbus, so it's a real easy commute. Even though you're located in a small business core, and this is a great place to create a business, this is still a journey to develop a business in a smaller city. So tell us about Lancaster and your decision to go ahead and come back to Central Ohio, and what were the first steps that you took?
When David and I moved back here, our son was really young. I think he was just starting school. We were living in Stoutsville, and I was still a wholesaler. I was creating jewelry and selling to retail store environments and museum shops, art galleries. And so I was traveling a lot to places like Cleveland and Indianapolis and flying back to Denver to service the accounts I had established there. And all that traveling was hard. And I was still a one-man operation, still creating the jewelry by hand in my small studio. And decided that I didn't want to keep doing this road thing. It was too hard. And so I noticed it when we moved back to Lancaster. David and I, David's from Lancaster, so we had the support of his family, which is, I mean, he's Catholic, and my gosh, so big family, lots of people my own age that I was already hanging out with, and so it didn't feel quite so cold as just moving like we did when I was young, because I'm from a military family. So that was part of the decision, and then from there, we just noticed things like the local jeweler was aging out.
Okay.
And the one that was in the downtown area. So we knew we wanted to be in the downtown. I always felt it was more intimate and more community friendly and more central to the city than the mall stores. And
right.
I just didn't want to be in that kind of a setting.
Well, and Lancaster has done a lot over the years to build the business core. Sometimes it's better than other times, but and for those who don't know Lancaster, the festival every year not only bring people in during that period of time, it's a 2-week in July music and art festival, and run all by volunteers, and there are thousands of people who come to that. But you get, like me, repeat business coming back, people from Central Ohio who know about your store from having visited Lancaster. So there's got to be some support from the city itself.
Oh, the city's amazing. They have this destination downtown Lancaster, which is a run. They've hired a couple people to run the organization, and with the membership monies and fundraisers, they position themselves to make improvements in the downtown. Physical improvements, plants, and trees, and cleaning it up, and cleaning up the alleys, making them more accessible to the general population. And then also, they have a board of a lot of business owners that get together, and they discuss everything. They talk about, and I used to be on the board, but things got a little overwhelming for me. I had a mother become sick, and I just needed to back out for a while. So. They also have programs to help, but the chamber too. The chamber has given us, I took a leadership program with them that mentored put me together with a mentor when I was first starting the business, who owns, she's still here, a computer technology business that
really?
she goes around to businesses and she helps them, fix their computer issues. And, she's a big company. She hires a lot of people. And so she and I would get together for several months for lunch and talk, and she would check in with me and she was a great mirror. She was able to help me see where my strengths were. That surprised me. I didn't know I had them. She would admire things that I could do that I didn't know I was doing. And then she would ask questions that made me think about things differently. So it was a great relationship.
And that was through the chamber?
That was through the chamber.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it was a really good program.
Well, what you just said about, Main Street, and we have this idea of Main Streets dying around, the country, which some are, but some are, like you said, Lancaster's really building up and such. Obviously, that wasn't a hurdle per se. You didn't have to look downtown going, is this really the place I want to be? Thank goodness. It was a kind of a minor hurdle, but at the same time, it wasn't a major hurdle as other the pieces of starting a business could be. What were some hurdles that you did encounter?
The bank financing was the hard part, was one of the hard parts. Finding a good location was the other hard part. A lot of the buildings in Lancaster were aging out, and people hadn't applied themselves to really making them user-friendly. So in a jewelry store situation, you really need to be aware of security and where's the glass placed and what's the door look like in the back door. Yeah, and what's overhead and underneath. And
well, even response time from the local police.
Right, and they're just a half a block down from me in my current location, which is
great.
Which has served us well on one or two occasions. And luckily we weren't there when that happened. And really we've had no issues for so long now that it's been, it's way in the past.
That's good.
Well, and so having owned a business before, you sort of had a clue on what the challenges were going to be. So you were able to prepare yourself to meet those challenges in a new location.
Yes, I was prepared, but I wasn't. I mean, being a young person, I started a second business when I was 45. And I have to say, the SBA had programs that we used at the time, the government was really financing a lot of women startups. Mm-hmm. And so we got free counseling on our paperwork for the bank, our business plan, mm-hmm. and we got one-on-one coaching. And she would go and get information for me that I didn't have access to, numbers, figures, and then they also hired Melody Borchers to help us with our QuickBooks. They trained David on how to use the QuickBooks system, which, of course, I think is essential to any business now. And and we actually got coached by a couple of older people who were retired from successful businesses, and we went and talked with them for a while. Mm-hmm. So everything that we could take advantage of, we certainly used.
Good point. Mm-hmm. And that is something that we talk about in so many different topics in all of our podcasts, is that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. You
have to find those experts, mentors, whatever you call that, and mm-hmm. do your networking to get that information, so that, it's not going to be a smooth sail, but to at least get through the high waters.
Yeah. The business plan makes you think about questions you didn't think about. Mm-hmm. And who is my customer? Oh my gosh, I hadn't really thought about that. You just think people are going to come pouring into your door. How do you get them to pour into your door and make those connections? And
right.
So there were a lot of things that I needed to have put in front of me to make sure that I understood that this was going to be, more than I thought initially. A lot of people think you put a lot of stuff in a storefront, you open the doors, and you're in business.
Right.
There's a whole lot of stuff you do in the background to make sure, and staying connected to the local. There are free business classes. Well, they're not free. You pay $10 or $15 for the lunch. By Action Coach, they offer these inexpensive business seminars through the chamber, and we would attend those regularly. I did, and sometimes I'd bring my manager with me, or one of my salespeople, or my husband would come too, depending on what the subject was, and we'd attend those throughout mm-hmm. the years.
So some of that help that you received with the SBA, it sounds like it was really good timing, because the SBA was specifically looking at female-owned businesses, which is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Do you think, I guess my original question was going to be, was it harder to be female-owned business to get this help? But it sounds like you sort of had that good timing mm-hmm. there. Was it harder for other people to get, for men to get small business help?
I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows? Probably not. But I think that was likely fortuitous, I guess, is because normally that's not the case. Normally it is harder for women. In fact, I've had some folks say they don't even bother to do SBA; they can't get the money.
Right.
So that is good news, though.
Yeah, it wasn't about the money so much, because I realized that with our situation, there weren't many people who were going to loan us the amount of money I was asking for, and I learned that fairly quickly. And one night, I completely threw my hands up and said, okay, I guess this isn't going to happen. And I was laying in bed, and then this idea hit me that I just needed to restructure the way I was thinking about the business, that I mm-hmm. needed to figure out that it doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles and everything in place and all the little things that I thought I had to run a business. I went bare bones and really looked at, what do I absolutely need?
Right.
And lighting, for instance, in a jewelry store, that's right there at the top of the list. So I had to spend the big money on the good lighting. And then we cut expenses everywhere else, and security, of course, you have to have that. And that's how we got started. It felt like an epiphany at the moment, and I was like, okay, I just need to look at this differently.
Right.
That's a really good point, because you want to dream. You
right.
want to dream big, because that those are the goals
yes.
that you envision. This is what I want it to look like 5 or at the end, whatever, 5 years, 7 years, whatever, but you got to start somewhere to get to that 5-year point. So some things may have to be pulled back, but be as efficient as possible, but still have that look you want, and know that, okay, next year we'll do this.
Yeah.
Maybe next year, or maybe in 6 months.
Well, and
that's a great point.
And that's a theory of retail too, is to making change brings people back again. So in some ways, not having everything all at once gave you some things to easily move into.
Yeah, and I actually didn't even have wedding rings. Oh, what jewelry store doesn't have engagement rings?
I remember when you started them.
When I started, I thought we could make it on the fact that we had in-house jewelry repair and the goldsmith on site and retail. But retail is a funny animal. It's got its really strong cycles up and down, and engagement rings are like funerals. People are going to pass away, so people who offer that service, they don't usually go out of business during bad times. And engagement rings, people are always getting married. And so I had someone, this time it was somebody who I'd been purchasing. She'd been an artist for over 40 years from Vermont. And she said, you really have to get into wedding rings. And she pushed for it. And she even told me the best company on the planet to do it with, which I did. I went with her because she'd been around for a long time. And they actually do all the work for Walt Disney, too. They produce all of their trademarked jewelry, and they designed it for them.
Wow, you get your own Mickey Mouse engagement ring.
Well, I don't sell it.
You don't. Okay.
That's in the next room over. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So along the way, people advised me and gave me information that was really helpful. And it all just kept unfolding that way, and magic, there it is. It's just,
right.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier about other individuals that helped you and still helping you, the mentors through the chamber and such like that. But there are some other specifics like accountants, suppliers, as you just mentioned, HR experts. Have you found this to be the case that you need other people on all these? Or how have you navigated this to find the right people, and what advice would you give other business owners, whether they're at the beginning stages or they've been in business for quite a long time and they're looking for somebody new because they've grown, they've outgrown their accountant and such?
We've had, I think, 3 different accountants at this point in the past 16 years. And we have the one we have currently, we've been with for a long time. We really like one of the women who works there. And there's been a real strong connection with her, and she's really good at taking personal meetings with us and spending all the time we need to ask the questions, and understand, and she guides us through all of that. They also found us money that the other accountants did not recognize as a tax deduction within the business.
Wow.
So I got a huge check one year because in the first year or 2 that we were in business, she figured out that certain things had not. So she reapplied all of our taxes, and we got this big chunk of money. There were losses prior to that because of mistakes that accountants had made, and that those little mistakes can really crunch a business and really put you back on the edge again, where you felt like you were finally sort of backing up a little and going, a little more cushion there financially. That can be wiped out in one bad mistake. I've made a few purchase mistakes. Luckily, they weren't too huge. So, caution. You have to really think about the decisions you make and not be too, reactionary to something, because I get excited about things sometimes and think, oh, this is so great, and nobody else thinks so. So
you never know. But with jewelry, it's not like food. Thank goodness, it's not going to go bad.
Right.
And at some point in time, somebody's going to catch up with your vision and want that piece.
You put it out there at half price at a real discount, and just let it move on. Let it go.
So do you think it's harder or easier to find those individuals you need to help you being in a small city?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Initially we didn't have money to hire a manager. There was no way I could pay $13 to $16 an hour right off the bat. Dave and I didn't pay ourselves. I ran the business myself for 5 or 6 years alone, and managed to get a few part-time helpers in once in a while. and my husband would pitch in whenever he could. But he really supported us the first 5 years. 100%. He supported our household. And then the income he made allowed us to continue to improve the business as well. So we kept investing for the first 5 years, and I didn't take home a paycheck. So so hiring was not a reality at the beginning. And then part-time help, I used a lot of the girls from the local high schools. Some of the Fisher Catholic girls and then some of the Lancaster High girls would come, and they would help us with our little specialty, decorator boxes that we do.
Oh, yes.
And
if you buy a bauble, you get this really cool box with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
I keep looking at Brett. Angie will appreciate my efforts.
There you go. There you go.
And the thing about young women is that they aren't jaded. They're still excited.
Yes.
And they have that energy, and you just feel it. So our customers would pick up on that, and then they're so helpful.
Yes.
And so we had great experiences with young people early on, and we still have young women in the store now. Currently, though, I have hired one woman who's retired and another one who's, pretty retired, both of them. And they bring other skill sets and experience with them. So we've got a nice balance going on.
Good.
But it's been a challenging year for that, especially this year.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we went several months with very little help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier about that you just can't open a business, put the open sign on the door and expect people to walk in the door, even though you may have the best thing, but it's kind of the best kept secret. That leads us to marketing and social media. I mean, what is your online presence? What have you found that's worked well for your business?
Well, like everyone, I think we started with Facebook, but we're finding that we have more followers on Facebook, but there's more activity currently happening on Instagram. So for the online presence, that's where our strength really is. And
what you have is designed for Instagram, if you think about it. What you sell is just perfect for Instagram.
Well, I'll be honest with you,
because it showcases, it's eye catching. That's what Instagram's all about.
Well, I hate to say this, but I'm not so tech savvy.
I was just going to ask you, is that what those young
women come in
okay.
and they have brilliant ideas?
Yeah.
That's what's okay. Yeah.
And they run them past me, and I'm like, wow, that is so great. And they know how to get the message quickly and simply without a lot of fluff and overworking it. And so I really appreciate those skills because I don't have them.
Well, that's a good point about being a business owner, recognizing what you can't do. So don't do it. Find somebody that can do it efficiently, effectively, economically, whatever the case might be. But don't think you have to do it all. Find someone to do it, because there is someone that can do it.
Yeah.
Do you find that the Instagram postings are more catered to Central Ohio, or are you getting a lot of business from literally across the country because of that?
I don't know that across the country is probably the truth. Honestly, I think word of mouth, that's the other reason I really love a small community, because if you do things right consistently, the word gets out much faster in a small community than it does in a city.
Right.
You get lost in the city. And I think you have to work harder, spending more money on advertising.
Oh, probably. Yeah. But it's when I was the director of an agency, we got new clients, we got new employers because I was out talking to people and networking and just getting out there to see what was going on, what people needed. That was the only way to really make that. I mean, I could have paid for all kind of print advertising and nobody would have ever seen it. It's in the newspaper once. What does that mean?
Newspapers are a hit and miss situation. I've learned a little bit over the years that timing is really important, and what service you're going to offer at that time. When do you advertise wedding rings? When do you advertise repair services and sizing services? And I've hit some just so well that we're overwhelmed with business, and other times, I have to back off to make sure we don't get too much. And so it's a tricky thing, that whole newspaper thing. But the newspaper still is a very effective advertising, even though the newspapers have shrunk to almost nothing here. It still gets the word out to a segment of the population that might not normally walk through my door.
Right.
They want to get a ring sized. They'll see it, that we do it right at the store, and we'll get that person in the door.
Is there joint advertising between the other businesses in downtown Lancaster?
Yeah, one of the most effective campaigns that the DDL, Destination Downtown Lancaster, offered was they started a Lancaster page in the Hocking Hills Guide.
Oh, nice.
The Hocking Hills have been booking out way in advance for the past several years now, currently. And this is where we get our clientele from, Cleveland and Cincinnati and Dayton, and they're coming in because they want to be in the woods. They want, they want to touch nature. And on a rainy day in the Hocking Hills, they don't want to go hiking, so they pop over to Lancaster, which is one of the closest major towns or cities near the Hocking Hills. That's been wonderful, I think, for the whole downtown.
That works really well. So we've sort of touched on this, and we haven't. I think I just used the word networking once, but really, this small town gives you an opportunity to have a very big network. Tell us about that. Whether that's been a critical nature as a business owner, finding your jobs, your job seekers, the young women working in the business. Those are sometimes difficult steps for people to take. It's really hard to put yourself out there and to get the word out to other people about your business because they don't understand networking and what's going on. And it's oftentimes hard for women to be good networkers. You've been
Isn't
doing
that
this?
surprising?
Oh, and we're such good talkers.
Yeah. When we get together as a group, women always have so much to say. We sound like a gaggle of geese. It's just like,
Exactly.
so much talking going on. And you just go to any restaurant and you can see evidence of that. But I did join. I did make myself join. And I have to say make myself because I do get anxious in intimate relationships with other people. So I would make myself do the trade shows.
Oh, yes.
Yes. That the chamber offered. And you do have to put on, and being in a retail storefront, you have to put on there is a persona. You're in the face of the public, and you have to be able to connect with that. And it took me a lot of years to learn to just relax and calm down and just be with the person who was across from me.
Well, but talking to the person in your shop, you're
very
in
different.
Yes, you're in a comfortable position. But going into a trade show, I would go to job fairs. Sometimes you do get overwhelmed, and you have to behave yourself because you're trying to portray your business as in a positive light.
Yeah, and when you have an audience in front of you, I didn't want to get too pushy. I didn't want to come off aggressive.
Right.
But I also didn't want to come off passive. So it's the fine line where you're just wanting to be conversational and informative and get the message across.
Yeah. I think businesses in any community, large, medium, small, forget that you are the business. You're the brand. They know you as the business, as well as
It's got your name on it.
Right, as well as a church goer or a member of this and that sort of thing. I think it as long as you keep that in perspective, it kind of keeps you honest in those events.
Yeah, and I think that's true for anybody owning a business. There are differences, though, when it comes to being a woman-owned business versus a man-owned business. A woman shouldn't come across as authoritative, but a man can. People see that as a strength.
Right.
But when a woman does it, they don't see it as a strength. So there are subtleties, there are differences in the way.
You can't come off being a mom, or nasty.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
How
It's
have you
tough.
handled that?
Badly sometimes.
Okay.
I've had to learn the hard way, just like anyone.
Does it frustrate you?
It's more of a learning curve.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not that I don't get frustrated. I do by my own actions or inaction. I have to remind myself that I'm a human being first, and then try to look at it from a more objective point of view. How would I like if somebody talked to me like that or presented themselves like that? And maybe getting too emotional sometimes, because I get really excited sometimes. I tend to get a little dramatic and excited, especially if the people around me are enjoying it, and I start to enjoy it a little too much maybe. But I'm learning to feel my way through that. So this is where the feelings are important and critical to those decisions and how I'm going to behave and present myself. And the more I get in touch with that, and then conflicts with customers, learning to just breathe and allow the customer to be who they are, and honor their complaints, and then try to offer everything you can do to solve the problem.
I've been in the shop when it's just been me, my friend Muriel, and shout out to Muriel too, and shout out to David. We have to give a shout out to David before we leave today.
The man behind the scenes.
The man behind the scenes. He's phenomenal. But I've also been in the shop when you couldn't get in the door.
Yeah.
During the music festival, there's a Friday night art walk, and it's just wall-to-wall people. So you are in a secure location with jewelry and people walking in and out of your door. That alone would make me nervous.
Oh, and it does. Some of my
oh my gosh,
some of the people who work with me hate that night.
Yes,
because they're so worried about everything for me.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be very dangerous, and it's not. You're hoping people are there because they are really interested in purchasing something, but you don't know. So,
right. Yeah. Well, before we close, we always like to ask our guests if they have any words of wisdom. Not that you haven't already filled this podcast full of words of wisdom, but maybe suggest some steps that someone should take in creating a new business, or do you know of resources available to business owners that, whether you took advantage of them initially or you found out about them, is like, yeah, that's helped a lot too. Just those bits of information here at the end that's a nice way to end the podcast.
Well, for the thing that came to mind for me, for people who are wanting to start a business, get used to hearing the word no. It's going to happen a lot. And don't let that be the end of your dream. Let it redirect the dream. The other thing would be, as much as possible, listen to your gut, and do your homework. Yeah, you gotta do the background work before you even open the doors. You really have to do the work.
All right. Yeah.
That I think is critical. You've given so many great pieces of information during this podcast, but one of the things that I was hearing you say was that you were preparing yourself. Yes, you've got help. Yes, you're networking. Yes, there are people that you may or may not hire or that's providing you with service or mentoring, but you yourself have done the homework you need to do. And I think that's really important for people to hear. You can't just rent space and open the door.
And realize there are lots of people out there who are willing to help you find them.
Right.
Yeah, find them. And some of them are as close as your family, your community, and then your government. There are resources. Use people like Carol. I bet Carol could direct you to a lot of different places.
One of the things that we hadn't really mentioned, but that is a great resource in the state of Ohio, are the small business development centers. State of Ohio's Department of Development has small business development centers, and they're located all over the state by region. So I know there's an office in Columbus that would take care of Central Ohio. And they do phenomenal work. And you need a marketing plan, there's somebody who's going to help you do it. Your business plan, somebody's going to help you do it. Lots of webinars and things that they've done. They put everything online during our lockdowns. And so the resources are out there, and it's all free.
Oh, and I wanted to mention one other resource financially, because even $1,000 can help when you're starting a business. There are business groups that work with groups within most cities that will do short-term loans, small, and some of them can be forgiven. as a grant, and then others, you might have to pay back. But even a few of those can buy that thing that you wanted to make the business better. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, so listeners, thank you, Ava, so much for coming.
Thank you
This
for
has been
asking
just
me here.
so much fun. But listeners, don't forget, we put our in the show notes, we'll put in a list of all of the things that we've talked about in this podcast, all of the different organizations to give you information, but also contact information for Ava Jewelers, because definitely, if you're in Central Ohio, you want to take a little buzz down to Lancaster and visit her shop. It is worth the hour drive, that's for sure. So thank you all for listening, and thank you again.